Please, Monsieur, it's your right to recognize. And what I want to say now is a bit serious, so I have put this down. Je tiens à présenter des excuses publiques pour ce qui s'est passé ce matin à la messe, lorsque notre sœur, Jocelyne Galula, était empêchée d'offrir la prière des fidèles. Cela ne se reproduira pas en particulier dans cet espace sacré où nous tentons de réimaginer notre Église en Afrique et dans le monde entier. So I'd like really to apologize publicly to our dear sister Jocelyne Galula, who was prevented when she walked up here to present the prayer of the faithful. For reasons I do not fully understand, but my prayer and our hope is that this will not happen again, particularly in this sacred space where we are attempting to reimagine our church in Africa and in the world. Finally, the palaver is a conversation, not a question and answer session. Just want to remind us of this very important method of our interaction. It is a palaver, not question and answer. So when someone finishes making their presentation, we are trying to enter into that space with the person and trying to show the dimensions of what the person is presenting and how that can also be for us an illumination into what God is saying to us. So it's a conversation, and we should keep it at that so that we can enrich our encounter. La palabra est une conversation et non une question et une réponse. Alors, s'il vous plaît, faites de votre réponse une forme de consultation, pas comme une demande. C'est la méthode que nous avons choisie pour approfondir notre consultation, notre dialogue entre nous. Maintenant, je passe le micro à notre MC, le sœur Leonida Katunge. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, now we'll start our program. We are 14 minutes down our time, but we'll recover. And we'll start with plenary this morning. But before then, I would like to make only two announcements. The first one is that the Wi-Fi of this room, please take note for those who have not connected themselves. Choice Wi-Fi is LRC, just LRC. LRC. The password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is not working, eh? Okay, sorry, I'll make it work because I see the microphones I'm also making, I'll make it work in a few minutes. Then, secondly, in your programs, we have translators. You have translators, and today we'll have two languages that will be key. The first one is French. The first two presentations will be in French, and then the third one will be in English. Please make use of the microphones. If you're not hearing what I'm saying, there's someone who's already translating what I'm saying. For the non-English speakers, please make use of your microphones. There's someone already who is somewhere in the booth translating for you, for the non-English speakers. And then this calls me to tell you that we'll have a change of the program in terms of the presentations. As you can see from your timetable, we are starting with, there are 3 persons. Number 2, the second presenters will be the third ones because of the instant translations. Please take note of that. And it's at this point that I also want to remind you, in case you have a challenge with your translations, just raise your hand from where you are, someone will come to assist you. Just raise your hand, someone will come to assist you from where you are. Thank you. So I would like to call upon our presenters for the day, and before then, I would like to begin with calling our president to come forth to take his seat in front here. Bishop Kusala. Bishop Kusala. Bishop, come forward, our president, and take your seat. Then, Sol Galula, Sister Galula, Jose. Sister Jose, come forth. Then I'll call upon the moderator of the day, Professor Mary Getui. Come forth, please, Sister Galula. Sol Jose. Awe. Sister Mary Getui. Then I want to call upon Amenan Madeleine Posi. Oh, sorry, Martinet, sorry, Martinet. Sir Martinet, Martinet, over to you. Martin. Where is she? Okay. Then Mombi Kiguda and Ettore Maranchi. Mombi Kiguda and Ettore Maranchi. Then Monsignor Lucio Andrian Ruiz, come forth, please, thank you. Can we clap for them as they take their positions? We clap for them as they take their positions. We'll have the session running from 10:20 to 11:20. It's 1 hour. So it's running from 10:20 to 11:20. So you're most welcome. Over to you, Professor Getui. Thank you.
Hamjambo. Yes, we welcome you warmly to this new space. We are privileged here at Queer to be hosting the debates as we enter into the elections in a few days. Yesterday there was a debate here, the deputy president candidates. And that's why we were not able to be here, so we welcome you. I think this is much more comfortable, and we thank God that in Queer we can have alternatives when some things are not working. So it's my pleasure this morning to welcome us to the session where we're going to concentrate on women. And we've already been informed about the order in which we are going to have the presentations. So I'd like to invite Martin, who is going to talk to us about women adopting newborn orphans and their social cultural impact. I hand over to you now.
Bon, je vais parler en français. Donc, si nous sommes prêts, on pourra partir.
Martin, just a moment. Is everybody comfortable? Do you have the equipment? Okay, please let's sort that out. Because we will not be able to get it if we don't have the equipment. And those here in front with me, are we all comfortable? I personally need.
Please, can we have one of the IT guys assisting us here? I'm not an IT technician.
Honoré d'avoir été associé à ce congrès et je remercie tous les organisateurs et toutes ces personnes ici présentes. D'accord, le thème qui nous tient en haleine ce matin, ce sont les femmes adoptives des nouveau-nés orphelins et leur impact socio-culturel. Avant d'entrer dans le vif du sujet, j'aimerais que chacun de nous, tout au long de cette conversation, essaie de se rappeler l'impact qu'a eu l'absence d'une affection maternelle dans son enfance ou même dans son adolescence ou encore à l'âge adulte. Il faut retenir que chaque jour, selon les statistiques de l'OMS, 830 femmes meurent des suites de couches. Alors on se poserait la question de savoir que deviennent ces enfants, qui s'en occupent, qui prend soin de ces derniers et comment ça se passe. Il y a des femmes, bien heureusement, qui ont pris vraiment, je dirais, qui touchés par ce drame que vivent ces enfants déjà, qui ne l'ont même pas demandé. Ils sont nés avec un membre fondamental, handicapé, d'un membre fondamental pour leur équilibre, c'est-à-dire la mère. Alors, quelles sont mes motivations? Pourquoi est-ce que je m'intéresse à ces femmes? Je m'intéresse à ces femmes tout simplement pour deux raisons. La première motivation, c'est que nous avons le poids de la culture, le poids culturel, qui fait que ces enfants, dans certaines cultures africaines, sont des candidats à la mort. Parce que disent-ils que, de par leur naissance, la mère est partie, voilà, elle a laissé sa vie, et donc ces enfants ne doivent pas vivre. On va mettre fin à leur vie, et si on ne met pas fin à leur vie, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? On les jette dans un fossé, ou on les abandonne carrément quelque part. Et ma deuxième motivation est née vraiment d'un questionnement profond. Je me demandais à chaque fois que j'entendais qu'une mère était désignée des suites de couches, que devenaient les enfants, mais c'est surtout la réponse ou le visage que les gens affichent. Quand une femme est allée accoucher, elle y est restée. Et l'enfant, c'est la première question qu'on pose. Lorsque la réponse, c'est l'enfant est resté, on dit « Oh, quelle tristesse! Qui va s'en occuper ?» Lorsque l'enfant part avec la mère, on nous dit « Ah, c'est mieux ainsi. » Et pourtant, c'est une vie. Et de ce questionnement, je vais rencontrer des orphelins qui ont vécu vraiment des histoires terribles. Et je vais m'en rendre compte que ces blessures-là proviennent d'où? De l'absence de la mère. Ces orphelins devenus adultes qui vivent un combat intérieur, un déséquilibre certain, n'ont pas connu la chaleur d'une mère. D'où l'importance de ces mères adoptives, des nouveau-nés, qui ne savent ni parler, ni dire, ni chanter, je dirais, qui ne sont même pas conscients, mais qui ont quelqu'un pour s'en occuper. Mais ces femmes, en réalité, ont un impact véritable sur ces enfants. Nous ne voyons pas cet impact. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est intérieur. La construction de l'homme est la chose la plus importante dans la vie. Nous voyons très souvent la construction extérieure. Je vous prends l'image d'un fruit. On peut voir une papaye, une très belle papaye, elle est bien mûre, la couleur attire. Mais la plupart du temps, nous ne pouvons pas la consommer parce que l'intérieur n'est pas bon, ou l'intérieur est pourri. Et c'est ce que nous avons avec les enfants orphelins. Nous les voyons, ils sont joyeux parce qu'il y a les orphelinats. Ce sont des solutions que les gouvernants ont trouvées pour s'en occuper. Mais j'inviterai peut-être les personnes, en entrant dans votre pays, faites un tour dans ces orphelinats. Vous allez vraiment voir la souffrance de ces enfants qui veulent repartir avec vous parce qu'ils ont besoin tout simplement d'une chaleur humaine. Alors nous les voyons bien beaux, bien joyeux, mais leur intérieur souffre. Et ces enfants ont besoin d'amour. Et la plupart du temps, ces femmes ne savent pas qu'elles rendent un service tellement important à la société. J'ai écouté la sœur Rosemary ainsi que la sœur Angélique. Elles parlaient de leur travail. Mais elles-mêmes, je crois qu'elles n'ont pas conscience de l'influence que ce travail a sur le monde et sur la société, et dans la société dans laquelle nous sommes. Ces femmes règlent en amont pour nos sociétés africaines les problèmes des enfants de rue, les problèmes des enfants microbes pour nous en Côte d'Ivoire, et je pense qu'au Congo on va parler des Chégué et autres. Ces femmes règlent ce problème en amont. Ces femmes nous aident également à être équilibrées dans le sens profond du terme, parce qu'elles offrent ce que ces enfants n'ont jamais trouvé. Elles offrent quoi? L'amour, mais l'amour désintéressé. Elles ne disent pas à ces enfants: ta mère est décédée, je te prends parce que juste j'en ai besoin. Mais elles sont prises d'une compassion qui fait qu'elles arrivent à accompagner les enfants, à les aider à vivre, à les aider à être équilibrés, à les aider surtout à être des adultes stables. Elles ont une influence aussi environnementale et sociale. Toutes ces femmes ont intervivé. Toutes ces femmes chez qui je suis partie moi-même, j'ai vu l'amour qu'elles donnaient à ses enfants. Tout à l'heure qu'on ne voit pas l'impact de leur travail. Pourquoi? Parce qu'elles construisent l'homme. Et lorsque nous construisons, qu'est-ce que nous faisons? Nous nous arrangeons à ce qu'on puisse avoir un fondement ou une fondation solide. Et lorsque cette fondation est solide, quelle que soit l'adversité, quel que soit ce qu'on vivra, on pourra puiser de cette racine pour une vie stable. Et c'est ce qu'elles offrent, c'est ce qu'elles font. Offrir un toit à un enfant, offrir une famille à un enfant, permettre à ce dernier de vivre dans une société où ils se sont protégés, ça n'a pas de prix. Et je pense que ces femmes doivent être célébrées. Et je le disais, ces femmes, je les compare souvent à la fille de Pharaon dans la Bible. Lorsque la mère de Moïse, nous connaissons tous cette histoire, l'a déposée au bord d'une rivière, n'est-ce pas, pour lui permettre d'avoir une meilleure vie. Et mieux, je dirais que ces femmes, elles représentent un peu quoi? L'image de la Vierge dans notre société. Elle a été au début jusqu'à la fin, au pied de la croix. Ces femmes ont dit oui. Ces femmes ont porté. Ces femmes ont permis à ces enfants, avant la sortie de l'hôpital, d'avoir un toit où se mettre. Elles sont vraiment importantes dans notre société. Alors en définitive, je dirais que les femmes adoptives des nouveau-nés jouent un rôle très important dans la croissance des enfants orphelins de naissance et de leur équilibre dans la société. Elles peuvent être caractérisées par 3 mots. Sacerdoce, par l'amour d'abord, le sacerdoce et le don de soi. Elles offrent à l'Afrique et surtout à l'Église de nouvelles opportunités de croire en elles-mêmes et en ces jeunes orphelins qui ne deviennent plus des problèmes. Ces femmes apportent des solutions et je pense que l'Église devait suivre cet exemple. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Martin. I shouldn't have moved because I went down and I did not get any translation. But I believe those who have interacted with the language, you've gotten something, and we'll spare our interaction with this presentation at the end. Thank you again. I'm sure you have challenged us about newborn orphans and adopting them and the women who are doing this work. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Lucio, who was introduced earlier this morning, and is going to talk about the missionary role of communication in the context of synodal church today. In English? Okay, he's going to speak in French. How many are getting the translation? Nobody. Nobody. Okay.
Make automatic translation.
Okay.
You can make automatic translation. You can speak and the sound will
Okay. 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 No, I think. Okay. I want to suggest that we get somebody to make a summary to capture just the main points at the end. Is that all right? Okay. So who is this who is going to do that for us? Somebody who... Okay. Okay.
Yes, sorry for the issue. Let us not mention the issue. With our able brother, he'll give us a recap in 2 minutes of what Martine has just said before we solve the problems of technology. We are sorry for that.
Good morning, everyone. So I just want to give a few summary and highlights of Martin Conference. So our aim was to speak about women adopting newborn babies, but who are orphans. And that's a big issue in Africa. But most of these women adopt babies who are not their own. But no one spoke about them. No one cared for them. No one acknowledged them. So Martin's issue was, how can we give name and faces to these women? How do we honor them so that what they do can be seen as a sacerdoce, as a witness, how we can care for one another? And for him, for her, these women, they have a great impact on these babies because they give them future. They give them care and love and compassion. And by doing that, from the beginning, they're helping the children not to fall in the trap of street childreness or gangs and any other challenge they can face. And for her, her conclusion was that once this baby are well taken care of, when they grow up themselves, they become compassionate. So her wish and her dream is that in our communities, we have to learn how to respect and care for these women who adopt babies who are orphans to give them a future in education. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It will still work. So the first presentation, we've gotten the translation, at least the major points. The next presenter, Lucio, he's going to speak in French, but at the end of it, he'll give a snap of the English. So bear with us, and now I'd like to invite you to proceed. Thank you. About 15 to 20 minutes, please. Thanks.
Hello everybody. I'm extremely happy to be here. It's a very emotion for me to participate as Secretary of the Dicastery of Communication of the Holy See. Well, I will try to, that means there are, in this moment there are no translation from French to English, isn't it? There are no translation? No. Okay. I will try, I hope, to translate directly in English. I hope that could be work. Well, sorry? Okay. You can hear? No?
Can you increase the volume on this one? Hello?
quelque chose vraiment important au niveau théologique, ou c'est simplement quelque chose, ça appartient au domaine de la technologie et de la stratégie communicationnelle. Alors, mon point de vue, c'est aller de la résurrection à la communication. Et c'est un clé pour marcher tout. Le tombeau est vide. Il est ressuscité. C'est ça la grande annonce qui change intrinsèquement l'histoire. Si il est ressuscité, la métaphysique de l'histoire a changé. Car si la mort qui mettait fin à toute l'histoire humaine n'existe plus, non seulement toute la vie humaine prend à nouveau sens, mais chaque pensée, chaque sentiment, chaque acte, chaque parole a son poids. Du tissu historique, comme la même chair et l'histoire de Jésus, Jean 20. Il n'est pas ici. C'est le centre du message évangélique. C'est le kérigma autour duquel tout tourne. Tout est construit et tout acquiert un sens et une forme. C'est la concrétisation de la prophétie. Voici, je fais nouvelle toutes les choses. Si tout est nouveau à cause de la résurrection, c'est de là doit être recréé. De là que notre mission doit être commencée. De là que la communication doit naître. Donc, si tout est nouveau, alors il faut le découvrir. Il faut le proclamer. Il n'est pas ici, il est ressuscité. Devient donc le fondement de la mission. Allez dire à ses disciples, ils y vont parce qu'ils sont envoyés. Et ils y vont avec un véritable contenu. Allez donc et faire les disciples. En leur enseignant. La communauté est ainsi construite autour du ressuscité et de la mission de le communiquer. En conséquence, d'une part, la résurrection est le centre du message. De l'autre part, elle est le fondement de la mission, parce que c'est un événement qui doit être communiqué pour être cru, vécu, parce que c'est la nation qui donne la salut. Celui qui croit en moi vivra. Deuxième point, nous ne pouvons pas ne pas parler. Les disciples, avec leur vie transformée, proclament et annoncent. Nous ne pouvons pas ne pas parler de ce que nous avons vu et entendu. C'est la réponse du disciple témoin. Il a vu, il a entendu. Il ne peut pas se taire. Et pour cela, il sort, il cherche, il annonce, et encore, il est fort devant la contradiction de la réalité qui rejette toujours la nouveauté. Croire entraîne la mission. Et la mission a pour but de communiquer, d'annoncer les kérigmas, de faire de nouveaux disciples. Mais la proclamation a lieu dans une dynamique qui fait appel à toute personne que nous avons entendu, ce que nous avons vu de nos yeux, ce que nous avons contemplé, ce que nous avons touché de nos mains, c'est ça que nous vous annonçons. Ces expériences totalisantes qui changent l'histoire des disciples, qui demandent la proclamation. C'est pourquoi la communication ne peut pas être réduite au processus, aux dynamiques et aux stratégies des médias et des moyens de communication, et encore moins à la technologie. Mais c'est la réalité la plus intrinsèque du message à la constituer, reçu pour être délivré. Donc, proclamation et témoignage sont la possibilité pour la connaissance et le suivi. Ainsi, la communication, plutôt d'être un média et une technologie, est une annonce et un témoignage, à partir desquels toute action communicative, stratégique et technologique est conçue et acquiert son efficacité. Troisième point, l'Église en sortie. L'Église de Pape François doit repenser aussi la communication à partir de la théologie du kérigma, qui fait sortir les disciples. Allez. Le pape même insiste constamment dans son magistère, car il préfère une église blessée en sortie à une église malade qui reste enfermée. Sortie est le mot clé. Il ne fait aucun doute que cette sortie est la base pour l'annonce, qu'il doit transformer toute la vie et les structures, qu'il doit être porté à la culture, et il doit créer une communauté. Mais cette sortie franciscaine ne s'arrête pas en annonce théorique, avec une déclaration de bonne intention, mais se concrétise par une réforme et un synode. La réforme est celle de la curie romaine, où les titres de motu proprio, Predicate Evangelium, est programmatique et annonce sa structure et sa dynamique de service et de mission. Cette réforme est un modèle et un appel, non seulement pour toutes les curies diocésaines, mais aussi pour toutes les structures ecclésiales qui doivent se mettre au service et en mission. Le deuxième est le synode sur la synodalité, où toute l'Église est placée dans l'attitude de l'écoute de ce que l'Esprit dit aux Églises. Ce qui montre l'ouverture nécessaire au dialogue dans tous les peuples de Dieu. Si la réforme met les structures dans la clé de la mission, les synodes met les personnes dans l'attitude de l'écoute. Mission, donc, et écoute sont des dynamiques communicatives. Elles sont les clés à partir de lesquelles toutes les activités et les stratégies communicatives de l'Église, dans cette culture communicationnelle, à l'époque de l'Église synodale, doivent partir et sur lesquels elles doivent se baser. Mais l'écoute n'est pas un acte isolé avec un fin en soi-même. Elle exige une réponse qui est iconisée dans la figure des bons samaritains. C'est un élément fondamental de l'ecclésiologie du pape François, dans une clé communicative. Samaritaniser. La parabole du bon samaritain est un élément essentiel dans son magistère et on le voit synthétisé dans la Fratelli Tutti. Il n'y a rien, ni personne qui puisse arrêter l'attitude consistant à aider les blessés de l'histoire, les tomber sur le chemin. Chacun doit ouvrir ses yeux de l'esprit et du cœur pour pouvoir aller vers celui qui est resté presque mort sur la route. Il n'y a aucune excuse pour ne pas les voir ou ne pas aller vers lui. Cette samaritanisation de la culture dessine le profil et l'attitude du disciple. Il a la seule possibilité de regarder son frère de haut et lorsqu'on se penche pour l'aider. L'attitude d'écoute décrite par le synode, qui n'est pas un événement, mais un processus, montre qu'il s'agit d'une façon de faire communauté, d'une façon d'être Église. Il s'agit donc d'une clé ecclésiologique construite dans une clé communicationnelle. La dynamique communicative de l'événement résurrection, qui dès le début est contemplatif, opératif, donc vu, entendu, contemplé, touché, et donc annoncé, se répète dans l'ecclésiologie communicative des papes François. Écoutez, donc samaritaniser, qui implique chair, qui implique toucher. Parce qu'on ne peut pas faire l'aumône sans regarder dans les yeux, parce qu'on ne peut pas être frère sans une transformation personnelle, sociale et historique. Finalement, pour résumer, la communication devient ainsi essentiellement missionnaire, qui doit annoncer le Christ et transformer le monde à partir de sa nouveauté. Dans le contexte d'une Église synodale et dynamique, et les stratégies communicatives ne peuvent être efficaces que dans la perspective de la mission, avec l'engagement de la chair, avec le monde, avec le modus vivendi et operandi d'écouter, samaritaniser, qui modèle la communauté dans les mouvements d'aller guérir les blessures en les touchant. La communication comprise à partir de ses racines théologiques est le véhicule de la tendresse de Dieu envers l'homme dans les concrets de l'histoire transformée. Merci.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm not a French speaker, but from the way the presentation has come, I'm sure there are very good points that have come in. A summary in English, maybe in just a few words, yes.
So we are speaking about communication. We are speaking about the missionary role of communication in a kingdom church. You know, there are different ways of speaking about communication. Most of the time when we speak about communication, we speak about new technology. We speak about mass media. We speak about TV and social media. But what Bishop is saying here is how can we give a theological dimension to communication? How can we elaborate a theology of communication? And so the starting point was about the resurrection. It is because of this sentence, he is not here, he is risen, that the foundation of missionary witness of the resurrection. To at the starting point of the announcing of the resurrection, we have communication. So communication can play a role in announcing Christ's salvation, in proclaiming God's kingdom. So whenever we speak about communication as a Christian, we have to keep that in mind. And the church should begin to look at differently communication. And how can we use different means to communicate? A church that takes seriously its modality should take seriously communication, which become for us mutual listening, mutual understanding, and letting everyone to share what they go through. Here, when we speak about the missionary role of communication, we speak about a church where everyone can share their pains, their stories, their memories, their joys, their hopes, and their dreams. So that's a theology of communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that summary. Communication is extremely important. One of the amazing weddings I've attended is where the pastor stood and told these people, it's going to work. There are 3 C's. Communication, communication, communication. Thank you so much for that summary. As we were saying yesterday, I think these are moments of reflection. It also shows that each one of us has got a chance to do something. We'll open up later for intervention from the floor. We go on now to our 2 presenters, Mombi and Ettore. I hand over the mic to you now. I don't know whether you're going that side.
Good morning. Pope Francis has urged us constantly to be a church for the poor. The number of those considered poor in Africa is considerably higher than the rest of the population. In Nairobi, it is estimated by the World Bank that 60% of its 4.4 million residents are poor and live in the informal dwellings known as slums. Our focus was on one of those slums known as deep sea slums, which borders the estates of Westlands and Parklands. It is obvious why poor areas border wealthier areas, because they provide labor for the wealthy counterparts. Deep Sea began as a small village in the time of just pre- and post-colonial time, as many more people moved from rural areas to the city looking for employment and better opportunities. The people who have lived there have seen it change from that village with vegetation and a clean river running behind it, thus the name Deep Sea from the young kids who used to go swim in it, to now a sprawling slum filled with sharks, and that river is now a little stream that is heavily polluted. However, this is the story of the women, some of the women of Deep Sea Slum, and how their lives witnessed to an incarnated Mariology. In keeping with many Marian apparitions, Our Lady has often appeared to the most disenfranchised and marginalized. So what do the lives and witnesses of these women tell us about our understanding of Mary and Mariology in this time? It has been mentioned severally and also proven through research that in Africa, women are the most disenfranchised members of the society, carrying a very great burden. And this burden is even greater for poor women, who suffer from things like low literacy levels, access to formal education, which in turn reduces their bargaining power when seeking employment, amongst other things. It would seem then that the best way to mitigate these challenges would be to provide education, shelter, food, and clothing, which the church already does as the biggest provider of social services on our continent. And that is true to a certain extent. However, a much more holistic approach is needed. And we as a church need to pay attention to it. We interviewed 14 women in Deep Sea who are involved in various projects that have been initiated by Ettore next to me here, about what circumstances led them to that slum, their ongoing challenges, and what they find helpful about various projects they're involved in. In their own words, every woman ended up in Deep Sea because they moved to Nairobi in search of greener pastures. Some made this move on their own, and some moved with their intimate partners or husbands. However, their expectations weren't met completely, because many of them ended up in self-employment, even in the illegal trade of illicit alcohol, and many of them have had to survive on, I wouldn't even call them minimum wage jobs, but on pittances that are offered by wealthier neighbors as they work for them as domestic helpers and etc. Many of them have ended up being abandoned by their partners or have become single providers due to widowhood. They have encountered abuse from intimate partners, and so some of them made a decision to split from them. Their stories, though very uniquely personal, because everybody's story is uniquely personal, have a lot of common threads in them. Their challenges tend to go around the same things: concern for their children, that they don't end up on the street as street children; concern that their homes, which are made of very flimsy structures, are not raised by the constant fires that threaten this slum; the threat of private entities who now claim the land where they have built their homes does not belong to them and want to evict them; and even more recently, the government claiming through eminent domain that area was targeted for a road and demolishing many structures and only providing $150 per family for them to move. Their needs for human companionship are just like any other person. And this is one thing that we often don't pay attention to when thinking of how to support women and families in poor circumstances. And I will share just the story of one woman. I will call her Esther, even though it's not her real name. She's a 47-year-old mother of 8 and a grandmother of 1. She left her village and her place of birth at the age of 18, having already gotten her first child. She followed her then husband to Mombasa, even though he did not want her to move, and there she found out that he had another wife. She left in frustration and came back home. Her mother-in-law tried to intervene in vain, and so she decided to move to Nairobi, leaving her child behind, to just try and make ends meet. She came to Nairobi without nothing and met a street hawker. And after spending a few days with this street hawker, who was selling shoemaker's glue to street children who are addicted to it to make her own ends meet, she decided to venture further afield and ended up in Deep Sea, where a vegetable vendor in this slum who was selling vegetables employed her to be cutting up vegetables to sell to their customers. Her payment was 40 shillings a day, which is like 30 cents on the US dollar. Out of that, she would save 10 shillings, a third of what she was making. She would also go beg at a nearby mall. As I've told you, Deep Sea neighbors very wealthy neighborhoods. And through what she was begging, she eventually managed to put up a shelter using mud, cardboard, and sticks. When she had saved enough, she traveled back to the village to visit her child and found her child was severely malnourished and later on died. The death of her child made her want to attempt suicide, and when she was about to throw herself off a bridge, a kind Samaritan stopped her and saved her. She eventually returned to Dipsy and was employed now as a househelp in the neighboring estates. Over the course of several years, she has been involved with several men who have promised her a better life, all of them leaving her with another child and eventually abandoning her. As she puts it, all women in Kenya are single, which is a colloquial way of expressing the infidelity of men, but also the inability to rely on anyone but yourself as a woman. All these women with these stories have come together under these projects and have chosen to live by three mottos: kukaribiana, kukubaliana, na kukumbatiana, which means to draw closer to one another, to accept one another, and to embrace one another. All in all, exemplifying community and the power of acting together, the power of Ubuntu. Thank you.
To talk a bit theological perspective, but summarizing their activities, they welcome in their own families chokora, that is street children. Then they started a group of microcredit, and they set up a small business called Africa Plenary, where they produce sodo, menstrual pads, and also they started a path of popular reading of the Bible. So these are basically the activities they are doing. Okay, now I want to give a theological perspective on that experience. Now, when we consider problem-solving strategies, we must acknowledge that always we are dealing with a soteriological question, because the divine ruach of the risen one is blowing. So there are transcendental conditions whenever we regulate the effectiveness of the human action. We are Christians, so we must believe that. So, best practices can be even hidden in the fragmentation of the lives of women of the Shanghais. In order to evaluate this practice of the women of Dipsy, so we have decided to establish an hermeneutic circle between the life of these women in the slums and the life of Mary. Why Mary? Well, Mary represents for us the realization of the utopia of the kingdom. Why so? Because she was the best disciple of Jesus. This is what we believe. And this teaching has been the teaching of St. Augustine, as we remember, and recently has been proposed exactly by Paul VI when he retrieved a title of Mary that was forgotten in the tradition. A title that, the way it's used by Paul VI, acquires a multi-semantic value. Paul VI said, Mary is truly our sister because she's the first and the most perfect of Christ's disciples, because she's a true daughter of Eve, because she's a poor humble woman who fully shared our Lord. Now this is important because it seems that Mary's sorority can correct what in Mariology does not respect Mary Fool's femininity. And from this point of view, the women of Dipsy can really help, because the women of Dipsy and Mary, actually they share an analogous historical, social, and existential situation. So we thought, firstly, to recover the historical figure of Mary by letting it shine through the bodies of the women in Dipsy. Secondly, we tried to examine the journey of these women, letting them be transfigured through the analysis of Mary's life. In doing so, we are actually taking the road of a symbolic sacramental dimension of the reality. One is the symbol of the other. And it is a very African way of doing theology, as has been expressed by Engelbert Weng, I'm sure all of you know this Cameroonian theologian. So the first step was Mary in the light of Pepea women. In the dominant Mariology, Mary was depicted as a tamed, passive yes woman. Mary has been representing the idealization of the maternal figure that every son wishes to possess in an exclusive way, and therefore must be virgin and devoid of sexual characteristics. Elizabeth Johnson proposes to set Mary free, and she says that this can only happen within a woman-to-woman relationship. So this is what we did. Walking through the narrow streets of Dipsy, we can let Mary appear to us. And so we come across an illiterate, poor, and economically exploited woman, oppressed by violent social and political structures. Pepea Williams can even tell us about her irregular family situation, a childbirth in difficult conditions, a story as a refugee woman. However, the condition of family regularity constitutes both for the women of Dipsy and Mary the place where they can exercise a freedom of action that is inconceivable in the patriarchal society. This situation becomes a reason for social and religious exclusion, for which it seems that the fundamental spiritual experience, both of Dipsy women and Mary, must only take place outside the context of official religion. Now this has an anthropological value, but also a theological value, because the poor are those who can hope and pursue a salvation understood as a paschal overthrow of the old system. Now let's go to the other side. The women of Dipsy in the light of Mary. Now, revisiting the key moments of Mary's spiritual biography, we reveal the beauty of these women and also the challenges. Mary, in her virginity, fully welcomed the gift of God and gave birth to Jesus. These women in the slums, they, for their simplicity of heart, they welcomed the integrity of the gospel, avoiding Pharisaic interpretation of the word. As Mary made responsible choices of faith that involved many risks, so these women in Dipsy, they are very courageous. They even welcome many other children and stranger children in their own families. As Mary constantly grasped the deeper meaning of the happenings of her life, even these women, they decided that they needed a spirituality. Because the more money you have, the more corrupted you become, if there is not a path of conversion. So they undertook this popular reading of the Bible. And you must see them. They look like Mary and Elizabeth when they were together talking, while Zachariah was preventing from speaking. Two women inspired that are conspiring together, sharing stories of salvation. Now, we don't know much about the participation of Mary in the public ministry of Jesus, but Mary said, do whatever he tells you. So we can consider that path that are making these women with those three Swahili verbs as their way of following Jesus. So their action didn't start from a social or economic program, but by kukaribiana, intertwining glances, kukumbatiana, welcoming bodies, kukubaliana, communicating dreams. Now, by the way, Mary was not even spreading pilgrimage of faith. She had to abandon the too human logic of her family members. So do the women of Dipsy. They must resist many times the centrifugal forces of the temptation of tribalism, for example, that is very present in the slums. Finally, Mary's discipleship finds its climax on the Golgotha, where she suffers for her son but also with her son. We had to come with her son. So Mary remained standing on the cross, and she take the side. She broke with the religion that had excommunicated Jesus, putting herself against the political power that executed him. This also do these women in the slum that have lost many people, and they are enlarging their maternity. Anyway, let me conclude, because you can even read the article if it's interesting, right? So let us give just the conclusion. Also, there are challenging. You know, these people, their children are starving. Sometimes they can solve that themselves for nothing. So they have to resist that temptation. That's why we speak also of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, Mary that wins everything. Anyway, the conclusion is this. We think that with our paper, we established two important facts. Mariology can become a force for social transformation if it is approached through the sacrament of life of African women. First. Second, African women can become protagonists of an holistic path of liberation by following the Lord on the example of Mary of Nazareth, but it's necessary that they truly welcome the real Mary as their sisters. This is what the women of Dipsy are doing, because they create their own Hail Mary, and they pray Mary in this way. So we want to invite you to pray Hail Mary in this way, and then we can get the translation in English the way they did. I think it is going to appear, this prayer, and okay, we can pray together.
Let me first do the translation. It says, Hail Mary, courageous woman, who praises the Holy Spirit, who praises in the Holy Spirit, who is blessed beyond more than all the poor people by Christ. She is the mercy of God, and she's blessed. She's the mother of those who are disenfranchised and those who are oppressed. Pray for us who are meek, who are poor, and escort us on the way to salvation. So let us pray together. Salama Maria, mke jasiri ushangiliaye katika Roho Mtakatifu. Umebarikiwa kuliko masikini wote, na Yesu huruma ya Mungu amebarikiwa. Mama wa wanaolemewa na wananyanyaswa, utuombee sisi wanyonge, utusindikize njiani mwa ukombozi. Amina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mumbe and Ettore. Katunge, just allow, we lost a bit of time, allow that we take about 5 minutes to get responses from the participants. So I'd like to, to give a translation this was in English. Let's get something in French so that we are all on the same wavelength.
Brièvement une traduction. Dans leur présentation, il y a eu deux aspects. Le premier aspect est essentiellement sociologique et le deuxième aspect est théologique. Dans le premier aspect, la question essentielle qui se pose, quelle est la situation socio-économique de ces femmes? Et la réponse a été donnée en 3 dimensions. La première, comment elles sont arrivées à cette situation, quels sont les défis auxquels elles sont confrontées, et quelle a été la réponse qui a été symbolisée en projet. La réponse est la suivante. Ces femmes, ce sont des pauvres qui ont quitté leur milieu pour venir trouver la vie en ville. Mais lorsqu'ils sont venus en ville, ils ont rencontré plutôt une situation plus grave. Chômage, des familles complètement déstructurées, et leur propre situation complètement en cul-de-sac. Et le deuxième moment, c'est comment élaborer des projets pour qu'ils puissent sortir de la situation. C'est alors qu'il y a une trilogie qui a été présentée, se reconnaître eux-mêmes, s'accepter et travailler ensemble. Et le troisième moment, c'est ces différents projets qui les aident à sortir de la situation. Ça, c'est la dimension sociologique qui peut se résumer en ceci. C'est des femmes pauvres qui ressemblent pratiquement à Marie dans sa pauvreté, mais qui ne sont pas restées dans cette situation de pauvreté, qui s'en sont sorties grâce à des projets qui les aident à retrouver leur humanité. La deuxième dimension est plutôt théologique. Dans la dimension théologique, la question c'est de voir comment, non pas elle ressemble à Marie, mais comment aussi Marie leur ressemble. Et la conclusion donne presque pratiquement ce qui a été dit. Lorsque nous lisons la Mariologie, n'essayons pas de prendre une Marie idéalisée telle que c'est présenté dans les documents ou dans les évangiles, mais c'est plutôt une Marie faite de sexualité, une Marie très très humaine, confrontée aux situations d'oppression, aux situations qui l'ont amené à être ce qu'elle a été. Et donc par conséquent, si on prend Marie de cette façon-là, on peut réussir vraiment à faire ressembler sa vie à celle de ces dames. Les dames en question qui sont dans cette situation peuvent aussi être considérées comme Marie, parce que lorsqu'on regarde leur vie et la vie de Marie, il y a des ressemblances. Par exemple, ils ont été capables de spiritualité pour être en mesure de faire face à la corruption, par exemple. Marie devant la croix, qui voit son enfant mourir sur la croix, ces femmes aussi ont connu beaucoup de personnes qui sont mortes dans leur vie. Et donc, pour conclure un peu ce qu'ils ont dit en rapport avec la Mariologie qui est présentée, c'est une Mariologie où Marie leur ressemble, dans ce sens qu'elle est à la fois première disciple, elle est à la fois leur sœur, et à la fois aussi la figure idéale de la maman. Donc, en bref, la dimension socio-politique, c'est leur pauvreté dans laquelle ils peuvent être sortis. La dimension théologique, c'est vraiment de voir comment leur destin ressemble à celle de Marie.
Thank you very much, my brother, for that summary. I think we are all on the same wavelength now. And we'll allow just about 10 minutes for you just to say in as few words as it takes. At the back, oh, there are so many hands. Sister Lalida. I would want to give everybody a chance. Let me hear from you. Number 2. Okay. I have read for 15 minutes, so if you can help me to utilize that time. I'd already pointed up there. Let's start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This side, 7, 8. If you take 1 minute, I think everybody will get a chance. So, shall we, from the back? We started in the middle, and then we'll come to you. Remember your numbers.
If you take more than 1 minute, I switch off the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is to Lucio Ruiz about your discourse, because in English the translation was short. And I think we saw the last part of the discourse when he did the connection between evangelization, resurrection specifically, and the flesh, the carne. Both Francis speak about ternura, that is love touching the flesh, tocando la carne. How the communication in this direction is that come to touch the flesh. It's possible that between the actual system of the communication, thank you for that.
Thank you. This side, you have your hand up. Professor, I hope you are seeing the people have raised their hands. In case them, thank you.
Hello, we have another mic here. It will be faster if the mic is already waiting.
It's a short comment about, I was surprised because of in two presentations you were mentioning Mary, which is fine to understand better the communication process. But what about Mary Magdalene? She is the first witness of resurrection, and her role is also very important for women and for all the church, the whole church. So I think we need to, in some way, balance, of course, the presence of Mary, the mother of Jesus, but also the first preacher of the gospel, which is Mary of Magdalene. Thank you.
Okay, where you are seated, the microphone is working. Please just touch the red button to move. Thank you. Oh.
Okay. Mombe, I heard from you at the end of your presentation this statement of the power of Ubuntu. and I feel compelled by it. Even though I feel distance about the notion of Ubuntu, but I can reflect on that in different ways. My concern is why you use the word in English power, because power has not been deconstructed or discolonized. This category of power places us always before somebody, instead of living within the other. And I think Ubuntu, in my understanding, has been connected with the simultaneous presence of people. So if there are terminology that we can use instead of power to reflect that this simultaneous presence better?
Socialize?
Sister Katunga, the numbers got mixed up, but the people who are...
Okay.
Of appreciation of what Mumbi and the co-presenter said about the other form, other way of approaching Mariology. But I think I'm more of what Carlos said. There is this idea of keeping Mary always as the only model we have. There is this theologian, Dolores Williams, who talks about the other Marys. There are so many people who are so down that they can no longer imitate the Virgin Mary any longer. They have gone so far in their life that all the categories that we see in Mary is very difficult for them to imitate. To those, I think we should propose other Marys. Let them start somewhere close to them, something close to their history and to their life style.
Okay, number 5 is here.
À Lucio, je voulais intervenir dans le même sens que l'autre en parlant de la résurrection comme le départ de cette mission de communication et donc l'implication ou l'influence des femmes. Parce que nous savons bien que les femmes sont cette première annonciatrice de la résurrection. Donc ce serait bien, à mon avis, de joindre les femmes à ce principe de départ de la communication. Et en lien avec Martine, juste dire que l'importance effectivement de l'intégration de ces enfants, ce serait peut-être envisageable de les intégrer dans une famille. Peut-être pas seulement des femmes seules avec ces enfants, mais pour que l'amour constitutif pour la vie et l'épanouissement de toute personne atteigne peut-être son équilibre, envisager si possible l'intégration dans une famille. Et donc comment prolonger en fait cette réalisation. Merci.
Thank you very much. Je vous remercie. J'adresse mon question à Monseigneur Lucio. Vous avez bien communiqué que la résurrection est une expérience totalisante qui doit être communiquée pour être crue et vécue. Pour le communicateur et pour ceux qui vont entendre la communication, et je suis tout à fait d'accord. Vous avez aussi dit, en citant Fratelli Tutti, qu'on ne peut pas être frère sans une transformation personnelle, sociale et historique. Je suis tout à fait d'accord. Mais dans cette journée où nous focalisons sur la femme dans l'Église, je voudrais signaler que tout ce langage de fraternité nous exclut. Nous ne sommes pas des frères, nous sommes des sœurs. Dans la proposition qu'on a entendue pour les femmes du Dipsy, on a parlé des sœurs. Et je voudrais dire au Vatican, les langues africaines ont des termes neutres pour décrire des personnes qui sont de la même famille. On parle des personnes qui sont nées des mêmes parents. En Kirundi, par exemple, on parle Abavukani, ceux qui sont nés ensemble. Ou Muvukano, c'est la fraternité qui est pour les filles et les garçons. Nous avons une cause à la congrégation pour les causes des saints, des martyrs de la fraternité du Burundi. Ce sont Abokfiliye ou Mubukano. Alors, je voudrais vous suggérer, est-ce qu'on peut, au lieu d'utiliser tout le temps ces langues européennes, trouver dans les langues, la richesse des langues africaines, un terme pour la fraternité qui inclut et les femmes et les hommes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for that. Translators, I hope you are capturing so that you give us a gist at the end. I think we go to the other side. Sister?
Yes, my conversation is with the paper of Martin. And actually, she opened my eyes to another aspect of adoption. Because looking at it from a different aspect, from another angle, we see the women, giving a chance to these children of having a life, a future. Whereas, looking at the law of adoption at some countries, like the country where I come from, it's like the other way around. The adoption is like giving the women a chance of being mothers. So instead of honoring them, you even get them to pay so much for them to give a future to an orphan. So that's just the basic contribution I have to make to that. I'm looking at it from another angle, which is she's talking about, we need to honor these women, but some law of adoption in some other countries think that we are doing a good to these women who are given a chance to these children, to be somebody in the future.
Okay. Thank you. My contribution, I want to appreciate the presenters, and personally I'm looking at women in a different way. From the presentation of the deep sea, I love the presentation, and when you look at it keenly, you realize that we have women who are rich materially, and also rich spiritually. I'm looking at a situation where we are now going to look at women who are rich physically and probably spiritually, but mostly the rich who are rich materially, to support women who are poor, probably materially as well. Because when are we evangelizing? When are we sharing our knowledge, our understanding of gospel values? How are we going to evangelize the poor? I mean the rich in other terms, in order for them to have an understanding of supporting the poor women. Because at the end of the day, it's women to women. Women have a capacity to understand themselves better and to understand other women better than others.
Thank you, Sister Anne. Please, those who have questions, can you raise your hand? If you have a question, raise your hand. If you have a question, please, can you raise your hand? Or a comment, sorry. A comment. Good.
Yes.
Simon Mary, please, hold on. Time is out. Time is out. We don't have more time. And we don't have powers to continue with the discussion unless the president allows us. And he cannot allow us, after which we will vote, and if he says that we vote majority, we take it to continue, then we proceed. Bishop, please, time is out, but we are at your mercy. Will you allow us more time and then we can vote so as to proceed? Thank you.
We have a mic.
Okay, I think we are moving on well, and this is a moment where we can enjoy the Congress, the Plenary, and we need to listen to each other. This is synodality. We need to listen. So I think I would like to say we have some time. So the time is within our limits, and I will extend the time for questions and comments. I will extend it with 10 minutes because really you don't need to give so much press by time. We are the one in control of it. And today I told you we have to go spiritual, not so much academic. Let us put Jesus in the middle of this.
Thank you, Bishop. Extension by, you say 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
from the time it begins.
Thank you.
Okay, I just make my points immediately because I'm number 5 and I've been waiting here. If I'm permitted, so I just make my own points. Thank you very much. Since yesterday, I've been listening to the discussions and the poor women, the poor, the orphans, the widows, and everything. And I was just asking myself, how much can we go to solve these problems? So I think maybe the church has to reform our perception of politics. Nigeria is preparing for election, and as a young priest in his parish somewhere in the north, and if you don't have your PVC, the card you need to vote, he didn't allow you to come into the church to attend the mass. That was his own way of trying to make a point that we must participate in changing the political figures and those who are in charge. Like this DC have been in this Nairobi for a long time. Many elections have been taking place. How come the politicians being voted by many that are Catholics in Kenya cannot change this situation of the DC? And we go there, we have 1 or 2 women, and we have 1 or 3 women. How can we just change that DC to one of those big estates you talked about that is the neighborhood? The church can't just be helping 1 or 2, 3 persons. In our countries in Africa, we have many Catholics, but we vote in the same corrupt politicians. We cannot change this way. In Taiwan, is 1.2% Catholic, 37% Buddhist, 35% Taoist. But many of the migrant workers there are from 90% Filipinos. And it's a scandal to the Catholic faith that people come from dominantly Catholic country to come to countries that are not Catholic, that are pagan, to survive. And I think if we just need to change our perception of politics and how we can participate more actively in changing the political situation of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One more from that side and then we'll close. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in Lucio's presentation. When you talk about communication as community building and identity construction, I want to problematize that. In the history of the church, you notice that communication has also become a source and system of erasure. In your research, I'm particularly interested in how does your research open up spaces so that it can become a polyphonic identity in our sense of ecclesial identity, ecclesiality, how it plays itself out, even in the context of interfaith dialogue. Even if you look at the literature today, communication has been used to erase multiplicities of diverse and dynamic ways of religious liturgical expressions. For example, even the Africans attempt to embrace different ways of liturgical expressions that tie themselves to African cultural worldview. So how does your research address that? So it doesn't become this wonderful utopic talk, but in praxis, it is not there. So that's why I'm interested. Your response would be very highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are still more hands, as you can see. We control time, but then the other things need to go on. And given the 10 minutes that we were given, I'd like to go back now to the panelists and ask Martinez, your last word. We have noted all these points, and after this we are going to be interacting. We can still raise the issues that we have. So in the same order in which we presented, Martinez, please proceed, and then we'll come to Lucio, and then the deep sea team. So Martinez.
Merci, professeur. Je commencerai d'abord par répondre peut-être à la sœur Sia. J'ai peut-être pas eu le temps d'entrer en profondeur pour les femmes, mais les femmes que nous avons visitées, que nous avons interviewées, elles sortent des chemins battus, des modèles d'orphelinat que nous voyons très souvent. Elles le font chez elles-mêmes, à la maison. Donc elles ont un mari, un époux, et ces enfants sont dans une famille.
Voilà, ces enfants sont déjà intégrés, donc elles veillent à la socialisation de ces enfants déjà. Donc du coup, ces enfants ne se sentent pas orphelins. Ils se sentent comme membres à part entière de cette famille. Et je pense que j'ai eu une seconde question, si j'ai bien compris, où on me demandait comment est-ce qu'elle matérialisait cette congrès, comment elle touchait le cœur, je crois bien. Je commencerai par dire que c'est de notre intérieur que jaillit notre vie extérieure. Alors si notre intérieur est blessé, si notre intérieur, excusez-moi peut-être du mot, est sale, notre extérieur va tromper tous ceux qui seront autour de nous. Comment l'Église peut toucher cet intérieur-là? Comment l'Église peut toucher ce cœur? Par sa présence. Il y a l'une des femmes que nous avons rencontrées, je dirais même les deux, une, elle est religieuse, travaillant dans le Nord, sœur Monica, je crois, infirmière, mais qui s'occupe des enfants qu'on jette, les enfants dans les fossés, les enfants qu'elle ramasse. Et elle me confiait qu'elle était seule à faire ce travail parce que l'Église ne l'assistait pas. Mais elle oblige l'Église parce que les dimanches, elle emmène ses enfants à l'Église et elle les confie à chaque dame, à une dame de l'Église. C'est quelques prêtres qui, de façon personnelle, vont vers elle. Et l'autre femme qui est laïque, elle était la responsable de la Caritas de sa paroisse. Mais quand elle a commencé à s'occuper à avoir un grand nombre d'enfants, elle ne reçoit même pas la communion chez elle. C'est plutôt d'autres personnes, je dirais d'autres églises, on parle de synodalité, hier on a entendu beaucoup de choses, mais qui viennent vraiment l'assister. Donc toucher le cœur par notre présence. Toucher le cœur en essayant d'aller jusqu'à la racine de ce problème. Vous recevez des personnes dans vos communautés. Je suis sûre que vous êtes des responsables de communauté et vous voyez des jeunes déséquilibrés, que ce soit des jeunes filles ou des jeunes hommes. Vous les voyez affectés par l'absence d'une affection maternelle réelle. Et si nous voulons résoudre cet problème, il serait intéressant de commencer à la base. Et commencer cette base-là, c'est de pouvoir être présent, écouter et chercher à guérir. Je pense avoir répondu à la question. Et la sœur, la sœur a dit qu'il y a des pays où tout le monde ne peut pas adopter. Effectivement, tout le monde ne peut pas adopter. On ne peut pas confier ses enfants à tout le monde. Ces femmes, elles ne sont même pas connues. C'est de bouche à oreille. Quand je faisais ce travail, c'est de bouche à oreille que j'ai su qu'il y avait des femmes qui s'occupaient des enfants. Et qu'est-ce qu'elles faisaient? La femme meurt. Il y a une d'entre elles, elle est à Marco, ici vous connaissez la Côte d'Ivoire. Elle était allée accoucher. Et dans la chambre dans laquelle elle était, il y avait une autre femme sur un autre lit. Elles sont entrées dans la salle d'accouchement, l'autre n'est pas ressortie. Donc le mari déboussolé, ne sachant pas où mettre son enfant, parce que c'est un problème réel, elle a accepté de retourner à la maison avec 2 bébés. Pour moi, c'est extraordinaire. Pour moi, c'est la charité et pour moi, c'est là que commence l'humanité. Elle a accepté de s'occuper de cet enfant. Et des enfants qui arrivent dans la cour de maman ici, qui n'ont même pas le cordon ombilical encore sectionné. Et donc, c'est grâce à ce travail de ces femmes de bouche à oreille que d'autres personnes emmènent leurs enfants. Mais qu'est-ce qu'elles font? À un certain âge, ces enfants retournent en famille. Mais elles ont constaté que le retour en famille, il y a certains qui mouraient. C'était d'abord 6 mois, après 1 an. Elles ont pris la responsabilité sur elles-mêmes de les garder jusqu'à la classe de maternelle.
Thank you, thank you. I'd like to cut you short, please. Sorry for that. Okay, Lucio, we give you just... okay, Mariah, you have the... Please make it 2 minutes.
Yes, about Mariology, I agree 100%, only that we can't say everything during the presentation. For example, first, but this is the category of sisterhood, is the category that helps us to involve all the women. For example, in the Gospel of John, Mary is related to Mary of Magdala, the mother of Jesus, Mary of Magdala, and the Samaritan woman. The three of them are called woman. So there is a link there. Second, our basis as Catholic for Mariology is what we find on the mouth of Mary. All generation will call me blessed. All these kind of things are quotation of the Old Testament. So Mary is related with all the women of the Old Testament. It's not a reason to take Mary above everyone. Third, Pentecost. In our images of Pentecost, always I'm fed up with that. Mary the center, the 12 apostles. It's not right. Many women were there. So 100% I'm with you on that respect.
Thank you very much. Monsieur, okay, you can pass the mic.
Thank you very much for the question. There are four. The first one is communication and flesh. If the communication is understood as a technology and strategy, it rests very, very far of the human suffering and flesh. Because the communication as a strategy and technology look always for efficacy and not for the needs. But if the communication starts for the theology of the flesh, well, resurrection, the communication is the way to know and to arrive to all men and women all around the world in the real need. For the second question, la femme. L'état est petit, donc je ne peux pas plus développer beaucoup toute l'implication que même ce que vous avez dit avant sur la résurrection à sa clé de la communication. Mais sûrement, dans la résurrection, le rôle de la femme n'est pas petit et fondamental. Il vaut la peine de compléter ma petite réflexion avec toute l'implication parce que la femme est au centre de l'annoncement de la résurrection. La troisième question, c'est la terminologie de la Fratelli Tutti, de la présence de la femme. Et Fratelli Tutti, c'est une expression universelle de Saint François. Le pape François a pris pas à... Oui, non, écoute, bon, je le dis comme ça parce que je le connais pas. Ok, je dis non, mais c'est comme ça. Et qui appelle la tradition riche et profonde que sûrement pas François de Sales et non plus François de Pape veut exclure la femme. Absolument pas. Et la résurrection est la clé, comme je dis pour la question précédente, avec la femme et au centre de l'événement. Exactement l'inclusion universelle de tous. Ça, c'est une clarification faite de lui-même par François. Ce n'est pas à moi la clarification, c'est lui-même qui a dit ça, d'où il a pris le nom Fratelli Tutti. Pas pour être clair, mais pour citer et reprendre toute la tradition du sang. The fourth question is the question of inclusion, yours. I really agree with your observation. The difference and the relationship is really important, extremely important. But it's necessary to start for a good, important identity, our own identity, because if we internally, we don't have a very clear idea, theoretically and practically, one, we cannot establish a good relationship with the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know the translators were working, and there might be a lot, but I just want to say, let's end it here. We may not get everything, but I believe that somewhere along the way, you got something that you're going to keep reflecting about. Thank you so much. Let's give the panel a clap. And Katarina will give us further guidance from here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And now I have to call on the panelists and the president and the court to just take a seat on the other side of the bench. As they move, we clap for them. Please give them another round of applause because they've done a very good job. But don't hesitate to engage them after this because the hands that were raised were many and maybe there's some contribution that will give them, that will enrich their papers. So don't hesitate to, to engage them. You clap for them. We also clap for our moderator, Professor Getui. Please give her a clap for the hard work that she has done. Yeah, we appreciate your wisdom, your sharing, and understanding. Thank you. Now, we've gone to the second session, and these are the concurrent sessions. We have two concurrent sessions. The first one is under the chair of Elias Omondi. Father Elias Omondi, I saw you at some point. Father Elias, please. Father Elias. Yeah, okay. That's Father Elias. You will go to room 6. Room 6 is downstairs. When you get out, the ushers will lead you to where you're supposed to be. Then we have the second group is under the leadership of Susan Abraham. Please, Susan, please, that is Susan. You will remain here. You're going to remain in this hall. Thank you. So please, you have time. What time is it? We are at 11:53. So we will finish at 12:50. 12:50.